Unmute it. Nikesh sir, namaste.
Yes, sir.
Namaste, sir. Namaste. കുറച്ച് ടെക്നിക്കൽ പ്രശ്നം വന്നു സാർ.
Well, that's okay.
So we are ready to go.
Yes.
A very good afternoon to all the participants. My name is Dr. Vignesh. I am part of the National Digital Library of India team. We are supporting the PN Panikka Foundation in organizing the webinars on Fit COVID and Eco Digital Jan Vikyan Jakriti. As part of the program, we have been organizing a series of awareness webinars with various eminent resource persons. In that list, today we are going to have the 7th webinar on the topic of generation of green economy through people's participation. And we have one of those dynamic and one of the senior most civil servants of our country, Shri T.K. Nair, who was the 1963 cadre Indian Administrative Service officer, and he served as the principal secretary and later as advisor to the Prime Minister of Honorable Prime Minister of India, Dr. Manmohan Singh, from 2000 to 2014, and he is currently the member of Board of Governors of Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode, and also for Center for Research in Rural and Industrial Development, Chandigarh. So without wasting much time, I will now request Balagopal sir to formally welcome our resource person for this webinar. Over to you, Balagopal sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vignesh. It's a pleasure and privilege for us to have one of the top personalities of the country, and one of the what do you say? He is controlling. He was the controller of the country for 10 years, consecutive for 10 years, as the Secretary of the Prime Minister of India, and he was controlling the PMO. And then he started his career, as rightly said by Dr. Vignesh. He was a very successful IAS officer of the Punjab cadre. He started in Punjab, and there he was shifted to Delhi, but he has got some affection towards his mother state, Kerala, and now he is in Trivandrum. Now because he is helping people like us, because he is having a high social commitment, and he this type of civil society organization, he loves to move with the civil society organizations and do something great in this in the country through social movement, through people's action. That's why we have chosen the title also, is how this green economy can be generated, and how the green economy can be maintained properly through people's action. Because he has, when he was the Chief Minister, Prime Minister's Secretary, he organized several innovative programs, and that through people's participation. That's why when he was the Prime Minister of the Secretary to the Prime Minister, is Narega, the most famous program, Narega, the National Rural Employment Program. It was initiated by, even though the Rural Development Minister at the time, but he was the main architect to organize this program and to make it implementation really successful. That the flagship program, the government of India, going to the needy, going to the remotest people and doing something for the needy, and helping them to have guaranteed employment for minimum 100 to 125 years, 25 days. And he is such a socially committed office, IAS office also. And one thing is very particular, though he was wielding the power of the entire of administrating the entire country, not even a single black dog is in his shirt, not even a single black spot, because he's such a transparent and such a truthful officer. And Kerala, especially Kerala, is proud of to have such an IAS officer, such a senior bureaucrat, and without any problem, any corruption, no nothing. Nobody can say that he has done something wrong. Fully transparent. All his actions were fully transparent, and the people like him should be at the top of the bureaucracy. That is why the Prime Minister was very keen. He should be with him all the time for the 10 years consecutively. So we are privileged to have such a top personality of the country to address the webinar with the people's participation. How the green economy, now we need the green economy. Sir, in PN Panikkar Foundation, we are focusing on two areas. One is knowledge economy, that we started with the reading, digital reading, like that. We are empowering the citizen with knowledge economy, with the IT enabled education and all types of education, universalization of education through Saksharata, etc. Apart from that, we are educating the masses how to love the environment and how we can preserve the environment and how we can live with the environment. Gandhi was telling by getting all this, we can have the entire resources for the humankind through the environment. That's why we have taken environment also this green economy. The green economy. We have organized so many training programs and so many seminars, and during the we have organized a bus also, a bus fitted with all latest technological equipments, including we started this 2008. We started this telemedical services through this bus, an articulated bus supported by the government of India. That is how we have reached the poorest of the poor in the villages. This bus will go to the villages and have demonstration in telemedicine activities, in digital libraries activities, in all other science communication activities, taking science to the masses. So these are the two areas where PN Panikkar Foundation it gives much importance: knowledge economy and green economy. So with this background, I am inviting our chief guest of today, Dr. TK Nair, the committed personality. He's a people's man. He's a people's man, and that's why I'm repeating. The Prime Minister of India is also former Prime Minister of India is also attaching much importance to him, and he was doing the all the planning, etc. Though Prime Minister is monitoring the entire thing, but he organized and he is implementing all the proposals of the cabinet as well as the other political parties also, but without any affiliation to any political parties, without doing any unfavor to these opposition parties, making everybody, all people's leaders together in one umbrella, and that's his strength. And I am proud to have him again, and we are privileged. Again, I would like to use the word privileged to have such a tall personality to address us through this webinar. Thank you, sir. I'm inviting you again to this August webinar. Kindly address the webinar, the topic. I'm repeating with people's participation, because we need people's participation for every action. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Balgopal. Thank you for the very kind words that you spoke about me. Well, let me start by congratulating you and the Department of Science and Technology in collaborating with each other for organizing a series of programs and events, ultimately aiming at creating an awareness among the people, particularly the young generation, about the importance of environmental issues and the grave challenges the world is facing on account of the climate change, on account of the deteriorating environment. Now, it has been recognized all over the world. The United Nations and its program, the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, have been very active in this area for the last many years. You remember the international alliance for studying this, on climate change that started a few years ago. And subsequent to that, several reports of that commission, intergovernmental commission, they have come out underlying and emphasizing very clearly the importance of various aspects relating to climate change and the impact of climate change on the lives of people on this planet Earth. Well, we know that from the beginning of humankind, if one may say so, nature and mankind, they have been inextricably interlinked. They are together. They are part of the same system, if one may say so, in the global context. On planet Earth, ever since life appeared and developed through various stages of evolution till the time that the human beings, as we are today, came into being, and we human beings therefore interact with nature, we live in nature, we are a part of nature in the larger sense. But we also realize now that over a long period of time, spanning over many centuries, the interaction between human beings and nature unfortunately has worked to the disadvantage of nature, if one may say so. There are times when people or when human beings thought that they must conquer nature, that they must subjugate nature, they must subjugate the forces of nature, and they should have supremacy over nature. And by exploiting nature, they would be enhancing their own level of living. We know that even today, in spite of our understanding about this relation between the humankind and environment, many kinds of human activities are going on in different parts of the world, which in one way or the other are adversely affecting our environment. We have seen this, whether it is in the small state of Kerala, whether it is in the larger context of India or the global context. The activities of human beings increasingly have contributed to degradation of nature, and the degradation of nature and the overexploitation of nature's boundary, together with population growth, have contributed to a situation where actually we are finding it difficult, to believe that we can live in harmony with nature. Practically every activity of human beings go against nature. Let's be clear about it. Even while we are speaking about the necessity for us, for human beings, to live in harmony with nature, in actual life, what many of us, most of us, and nations including, they do things which are exactly the opposite of that. You can contextualize this in terms of your village, in terms of your state, in terms of your country, and globally. We read about big events which taking place globally. We read about destruction of the Amazon forests. We read about overexploitation of soil. We read about overexploitation of our water resources. We read about the destruction of our forests. All these things, while we realize that they ultimately contribute to degradation of nature, they ultimately contribute to climate change, still we persist in doing that. To my mind, this is the greatest tragedy of our times, of human beings, that they are not able to live their talk. They talk something, but when it comes to doing, we do exactly the opposite. Now it's a paradox, and regrettably, human beings have been and continue to be victims of that kind of a situation. Now, coming to the recent developments which are affecting nature, we know that during the last few decades, the fury of nature unleashed on humankind is unprecedented from one end of the globe to the other. Say from Kerala to say remote areas in the United States, areas in Australia, in South America, in all parts of the world, the adverse effects of these activities of human beings are felt through man-made calamities. We have been, victims of natural calamities. We have been used to that. But today, more than natural calamities, it is calamities which have been caused by human actions, which are causing damage, destruction, and misery to human beings. People who live in Kerala, we are familiar with 3 or 2 consecutive years of unprecedented floods, which the state did not know for many, many years. After many, many years, the state witnessed unprecedented floods. Consequently, the destruction of property, the destruction of the livelihoods of the people, and even many lives were lost in these calamities. And even while we are talking, there are these calamities of various kinds taking place in different parts of the world, whether these be wildfires in Australia or United States, or hurricanes, or unprecedented rains. These phenomena are happening, reminding us every minute, as it were, of the adverse consequences of what we have been doing. Let's realize that population growth contributed quite a lot to the overexploitation of nature. There was a time when people were limited in number. They could live as freely as as happily as they wanted in the large expanse of land which was available. But today it has reached such a stage that forests, which have been naturally the habitats of animals, they are being encroached upon by human beings, and consequently we have in many places this animal-man conflict. Men get killed, animals get killed on account of these conflicts. And this conflict is directly related to the encroachment of human beings on areas, forests, which once were the preserve of the animals. So that's only one aspect of that. Now think of the overuse or the misuse of land resources. Kerala is a classic example because the land is limited. Most of the area in the state of Kerala is geographically fragile, but in terms of population, Kerala's population is very, very high in density, and therefore the people are encroaching upon areas which were once forest areas, areas which were once the preserve of the animal kingdom. Now, you see, every flood, large magnitude, practically every season, causes destruction of houses, which unfortunately have been built on ecologically fragile areas. We have invited disaster for ourselves by building in those areas where the land is very fragile, where construction is most avoided. But because of the pressure of population and because of our over anxiety to go into those areas which have tourist potential, we encroach lands, we do construction work which is absolutely avoidable in those areas. Therefore, what happens? Every year or every 2 years, we see these calamities taking place. At that time, we talk very much in terms of living in tune with, in harmony with nature. We produce reports, we talk about it endlessly, we proclaim, our great attachment to nature, our commitment to natural protection, our commitment to environmental concern. But no sooner the season is over than we forget about this. So I'm just giving this example in order to bring home the point that humankind has reached a stage where because of our activities over a long period of time, the climate has become not only fragile, most of the time, it is now becoming somewhat adverse to normal life. Climate change is a phenomenon which is now globally accepted. There was a time, of course, when people were doubting about it. They, at one point of time, thought that it was all, a modern fad, and it is, the brainchild of a few environmental scientists or some, naturalists of what you call, a certain perception or a very romantic perceptions about the idyllic life in olden times. It's not so. We realize it before our own eyes. We see the adverse effects of that. And globally, in spite of one or two dissenting voices of people who are fairly reckless, the globe, the world at large has accepted the reality of climate change. And the root cause of climate change, to put in very mild, very simple, simplistic terms, is warming of the earth or warming of the atmosphere on account of overuse of materials like coal, hydrocarbons for generating energy. The energy creation or energy generation through these means have contributed or are contributing to emissions of carbon dioxide, which in the atmosphere causes a rise in temperature. So rise in temperature in different regions of the world, spread over a fairly good number of years, is the phenomenon of climate change that we are witnessing. Now, as we have discovered or realized that burning fossil fuels is one of the most important villains in contributing to global warming. People all over the world have started doing research and finding out what are the alternatives to these fuels, which are causing emissions in terms of carbon dioxide. Well, let's also realize that this world is a very unfair world. There are large areas, major part of the globe is inhabited by people who are poor, who have no means of subsistence even. And on the one side, you have such a majority of people in the world, and on the other, you have a minority in certain parts of the country, of the world, of course, including in India, which live, in great not only prosperity in spending too much on themselves, and also conducting or living a lifestyle which is not at all sustainable. So on the one side, you have poverty, grinding poverty of hundreds of thousands of people, and on the other, you have a few hundred or a few thousand people living in the ultra luxury, consuming more than what is their due, and contributing to global warming. So on one side, you have the natural, the phenomenon of climate change, and on the other, and the various contributing factors to that. On the other, the role of human beings in bringing about such a state of affairs. Well, those who are familiar with these matters about climate change, environmental protection, etc., would be reminded of what Mrs. Gandhi, the former Prime Minister of India, told a global audience of this was a conference called by the global leadership on environment, on the degradation of nature, And in that conference, she proclaimed quite rightly, as we realize practically every day now, that poverty is the biggest polluter. So we talk about pollution caused by A, B, C factors, but if you look at poverty and its various ramifications on society, on the environment, we realize that poverty is the biggest polluters. Large sections of humanity living in grinding poverty, they strive for a better day. They strive for 3 square meals a day. They pine for or they desire to have a shelter over their head. They would like, potable, healthy drinking water. They will require energy to light their homes. Now, all these necessities, very bare minimum necessities of life, are denied to large sections of society. And therefore, governments and the leaders of people, in those countries are fighting for a better livelihood, a better life for them. And for that purpose, again, unfortunately, you will have to exploit nature. Although our share of the underdeveloped world or the developing world in contributing to the situation leading to climate change is very minimal. The per capita consumption of energy in India is very, very low compared to the rest of the world. But at the same time, let us realize that whatever we do today to enhance in the conventional way the supply of energy is going to contribute to climate change, contribute to the warming of the atmosphere. So we are caught in a dilemma. People living in poor countries, people living in developing countries, they have this dilemma. On the one side, they have to devote themselves, their energy, to see that their lives improved a little bit. Not to the level of people in the rich countries, but a little bit, where they get at least a shelter over their head, drinking water, and 2-3 square meals a day. Even to provide that to these vast millions of people, we have to exploit nature. We have to produce energy. In India, we know that even today, the large sources of our energy are by burning coal and by burning hydrocarbon. So both burning coal and hydrocarbon are not good for the environment. Both contribute to generation of carbon dioxide. Both therefore contribute to climate change. But the alternative to us, what is the alternative? Do we stop production of energy altogether in order to see that we do not, make further, contribution to the climate change? No. Technology and science are increasingly coming to the aid of, or to the rescue, or to developing new methods of producing energy which are not environmentally unfriendly. So we have a great commitment, therefore, in this country, in consonance with the conclusions reached by the global bodies, that we will concentrate more on producing energy through unconventional methods. We have a commitment to produce a certain, percentage of our energy requirement through unconventional or non-conventional methods. The most important of which is solar energy. So we have got vast potential because of our climate, and we are therefore concentrating on producing solar energy so that solar energy becomes an important component of our energy mix. Similarly, biomass and the waste which we generate in huge quantities, they can be sources of energy. And technologies are being developed in order to exploit these resources for production of energy instead of, contributing to more production of carbon dioxide along with energy. Now, I mentioned this point in order to bring home the fact that the world has got different challenges at the same time. On the one hand, will reduce the carbon dioxide emissions and curtail or to keep within limit the global climate rise. To the global understanding is that you will not, or the globe production activities, life on Earth will not contribute to more than 2% of the carbon dioxide production as a result of our activities. But let's realize that when it comes to technology, new technologies for tackling the problems of environment, the developing world is again at a disadvantage because for historic reasons, these technologies have been developed in the rich world or in the developed world, and in many instances, these technologies are the reserve of private undertakings, private corporate beings, and they access to technology for the underdeveloped world is very limited because of its lack of resources. So funding for the acquisition of technology for ameliorating environmental problems is one of the major global challenges. While on the one hand, there is a global agreement that climate change has got to be tackled on war footing and that environmental degradation has got to be stopped. At the same time, there is a dearth of resources for doing that. And technology is not available to large sections of society, to large number of countries, which can solve this problem. So it's a continuing challenge before the global community, how to finance and how to make accessible technologies, new technologies, which can help save the planet. On the positive side, let's also talk about the large awareness, and at least now people are conscious. And the green economy concept, which has now been accepted, it is a concept in very simple terms. It means you use as limited natural resources as efficiently as possible to satisfy your needs. So the maximum, the most efficient, the most limited use of natural resources, exploitation of natural resources for enhancing livelihood. And when we talk about enhancing livelihood, we have to talk in today's world more in terms of providing livelihood opportunities to the large majority of poor people. So the resources that are at our command, they have to be used the most efficiently and most inclusively, in the sense that the resource utilization should benefit the people who have been denied those benefits in the past. So, I mean, you can't think in terms of a world where every human being in the foreseeable future is endowed with whatever he or she needs for a sustainable level of living. It's not possible because the world is so unequal. About 1% of the total population, about 1% of Indians, for instance, have command over more than 60% of our resources. So that is the state of affairs in India. It's not different in the globe at large. Therefore, as we talk in terms of protecting the environment, preserving the environment, saving the the planet Earth from the adverse consequences of climate change, we have to ensure that our activities are attuned to the needs and the basic requirements of the poor people. We can't, in all conscience, think in terms of development strategies and development programs which exclude the poorer people. Unfortunately, even in India, most of the time, in spite of the commitment of the state and central governments to be pro-poor in their policies, in effect, many times we see that these policies, when they get implemented, do not work to the advantage of the poor, the intended beneficiaries. They work to the advantage of those who already have. Now, a couple of things more let me say. This is nothing new to India, but it is new to the world. The world as it has developed. You remember what Mahatma Gandhi used to talk about the poor and about the needs of people. He has been insisting on saying that this world, the planet Earth, has enough to meet the needs of the people, but it doesn't have enough to meet the greed of the people. So the manifestation of that is in today's world, the rich and the poor. The rich consuming 100 times or 1,000 times or even more than what they need, and the poor getting nothing. So the needs of the poor are neglected, and the greed of the well-to-do, of the rich sections of society are taken care of. Unfortunately, most often, the developmental processes of which we are all part today contribute to this end. This one part. Let's think of the growth as we talk about. Countries talk about the rate of economic growth. The progress of a country is measured in terms of its economic growth. We often read in the newspaper that the rate of growth of the Indian economy has come down, or is it plateauing? It's not going up. When we talk about the development of human society or the development of India, only in terms of growth of the GDP, to my mind, we are further contributing to inequalities. We are further contributing to indirectly and directly to the phenomena like climate change. Now, what do we do? Caught as we are, there is no need to emphasize that in the foreseeable future, the process of growth will continue more or less the way in which it has been, unless globally very effective steps are taken to not only, to reverse it or to change the direction in which we are going. So that's where we talk in terms of alternate sources of energy. That's where we talk in terms of reducing the consumption of luxury goods. We hear about the three, optical principles of environmentalism. That is, you try to reduce your use to the extent possible. If that is not possible, you reuse the materials that you have been using. And that is also not possible, or as a third part of the same thing, you think in terms of recycling. In our day-to-day lives, ordinary people like us, even we can contribute to the process of, maintaining the balance of the planet, and to reversing gradually the process of environmental degradation, if we keep in mind in our own daily lives these three things, that you reduce your demands. Well, it is easier said than done. If you ask me on deeper analysis, you'll come to the conclusion that if all humanity reduces its requirements, the progress in the sense in which we understand today will be, will come down. Think of, very common now of the television sets. There was a time when there were no televisions at all. Then came a black and white television. Then came a color television. Now you see the hundreds of varieties of television. Each model slightly different from the other, but each using more new materials. Imagine a situation where nobody asks for new TV sets. Nobody asks for new equipments or new entertainment equipments inspection. The growth of that sector of the industry then comes down. And that will contribute to lower level of economic growth in the sense in which we understand. If globally people start reducing their demands, talk about anything, the number of clothes you have, the number of utensils you have, the number of other material comforts that you acquire. If the demand for those things go down, then economic growth slows down. So therefore, there is an inherent contradiction in the pursuit of our economic growth strategy and our pursuit, or at least professed pursuit of environmental goals. So logically, this has to be reconciled, but in the process of trying to reconcile or trying to find ways and means, we cannot waste precious time. And therefore, different kinds of methods, very ingenious methods are being suggested in order to reduce. Ultimately, the objective would be to undertake only those activities which are environmentally friendly and which consume the least of natural resources. What can human beings, people like you and I, contribute? Well, no doubt, we are not only individuals, not only communities, not only a country in today's world cannot contribute very much, because the problems have become global in scale. Global understanding, global efforts are needed to tackle these problems. The problem of climate change and the manifestations of that climate change, or rising temperature, environmental degradation, these are global problems. And what happens in one part of the globe affects the rest of the globe also. So the solutions have got to be global. But we know that arriving at a global solution, except in terms of large principles, is very difficult. Efforts have been going on for the last many years. The United Nations have held God knows how many conferences to talk about problems of environmental degradation, problems of biodiversity destruction, problems of reducing the emissions of carbon dioxide and other harmful gases into the atmosphere. So people have now realized that while these problems are global, by the large solutions will have to be based on global cooperation. Communities and individuals, countries, communities, individuals can also play their very strong role. Each one of us, if we realize the magnitude of the problems, and if we are sincere in our desire to reduce the size of the problem, if not totally remove them in the near future, we can make little contributions in our lifestyle, in the way in which we conduct ourselves. That's at the very rudimentary level of human beings. people have started realizing the importance of that while fully acknowledging that these problems are global. So we now generally people talk about think globally. Problems are global, solutions also will have to be global, but at the same time, you act locally. Think globally, act locally. You see, say for instance, the state of Kerala, people living in Kerala, or people living in various panchayats in Kerala, or families, individuals, whatever they can do to mitigate the calamity, to reduce the consumption of natural resources, and to reduce consciously the use of those articles which have been produced with the technology is exploitative. Well, I realize very well that's very easy to talk about it, but it is very difficult to practice. And although Mr. Balgopal's institution, several institutions like that, Government of India, its various ministries, they have all schemes and plans. They all talk about, the role of each segment of society and the role of individuals in ameliorating the problem. So, but still we realize that it has got to be ingrained in our minds. Each and every step of ours, each and every step of our life has got to be informed, have got to imbue with this concept of green growth. That is growth which is conducive to the maintenance of the balance of nature, which reduces the exploitation of natural resources to the minimum, which ensures the maximum efficient use of those resources, and aiming at these resources used most efficiently for the benefit of the larger sections of people. Inclusive growth, growth which takes into account mostly the requirements of the larger sections of poor people. Inclusive growth which is based on very, very most efficient means of production which uses natural resources to the minimum. That in crude terms is what the world is attempting at, and that is the objective which it's not the long-term objective, but these short-term objectives, if achieved at various levels in different parts of the world, they scale up. The total impact of it or these measures would definitely be a sizable, significant contribution to the problem of climate change, to the problems of degradation of the environment, and to the problems of poverty, which, as Mrs. Gandhi said, is the biggest of polluters in the world. So there are various facets of it. There is a global action plan. There is the sustainable development goals, which the United Nations, or under the auspices of the United Nations, countries of the world have accepted. Then there are the nationally intended, action plans. India has got its own action plan. Kerala state has its own action plan, all emanating from these 17 sustainable development goals. So at the apex of it, the highest level, is the attainment of the sustainable development goals by the world through the actions of its constituent countries, and the countries through the steps taken by its constituent units, and ultimately coming down to the level of the people. So people-centric has to be, or are, these activities. We have realized that 10 or 15 people in charge of, elected to rule a country, or 15, 16, not 15, 16, under countries represented by the heads of government or heads of state, They cannot decide for themselves. They cannot decide for the rest of the world unless the people realize the importance of this, unless there is an active involvement and participation of the people. So in the implementation of environmental friendly action plans, participation of the people is crucial. And people living in Kerala, we are particularly fortunate that we have, over a period of time, evolved a system of governance which goes down to the grassroots, our village panchayats. So these panchayats, and the wards which constitute the panchayats, and the people who inhabit these areas, they are central both in creating this problem, if I may say so, and also in solving this. It's individual actions which contribute to large problems. Take, the pollution caused by accumulation of urban waste. In most of the places, this urban waste is created by us. These are not coming from one factory or the other. The urban waste emanates from each one of us, from each one of our families, and spread over larger areas, over longer periods of time. Those problems of waste removal becomes really very, very difficult. Today, in the city of Thiruvananthapuram, it's extremely difficult to think in terms of, not only in thinking in terms, to evolve an implementable plan which will be accepted by the people of the city. The problem has become so complex. Each one has his own very personal agenda, if one may say so. And therefore, the solution to the problem of environment degradation, the solution to the climate change, largely depends upon activities of individuals and ultimately, of course, the collective activity or the collective resolve of the globe, of the world. So the collective resolve of the world is not built upon in the thin air. That collective resolve has got to come from the resolve ultimately of the individuals, the human beings. So therefore, the emphasis on people's participation in the green growth, as we call it fashionably now, is extremely important. Without people's participation, without people's wholehearted involvement, there is no question of any green growth of any kind taking place. Let's also realize that the components of green growth, what we call will make a green economy, that those components themselves should evolve, should develop from the people. But they are the ones who have to say that, look, these are the ways in which we think we can tackle the problem in our area. You see, Thiruvananthapuram city, when it plans for its environment protection plans, when it thinks in terms of its waste removal program, it need not follow what is being done in the United Kingdom or in the United States. Of course, problems are there too, but they have, depending upon their factor endowments, their hundreds of factors, they have their way of doing it. We have to have our own ways of doing it. And that's why the importance of local level planning, local level action. Let me repeat once again that what is good for even one district in the state of Kerala may not be good for the other district, or the problems may be different. So realizing all these complexities, which are part of the problem the world is facing, the responses would also be complex. It cannot be a unidimensional approach. It cannot be, a one-size-fits-all solution. They have to be local specific. So while you think globally, act locally, and that is what I would like to emphasize, and that is the message that I would like to convey. While once again congratulating Mr. Balgopal for his great initiative. I have known him for a number of years, from the time when he was most active in the literacy campaign, which became a huge, big success, not only in Kerala, but in different parts of the world. He has now got into this equally important aspect of human life on planet Earth, which is facing very critical problems and very, very huge challenges. I think this.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session. We already have got comments. One suggestion is from Mr. Manjunatha. His suggestion is let's make a chain process that every person will grow at least 2 plants in their places and request their friends to do so. And similarly, stop avoid using plastics and then use locally made products for any procurement. So that is his suggestion and comment. So I have a question, sir. So I have listened to you your entire lecture and I completely enjoyed it. So you, as per my understanding, it's completely a paradox. On the one hand, we are looking at having economic growth. On the other hand, we are aiming to fight global warming and sustain bringing out people out of poverty. So it's a paradox that we might have to balance it out. My question to you is, how do you think the rural employment guarantee scheme can contribute towards economic growth as well as in generating a clean economy? Your views on this would be really helpful, sir.
Well, to the best of my understanding, the rural employment program has been one of the most, let me say, even successful programs which was implemented or which is being implemented in the country, because as I have said umpteen times, we are a country of extremely poor people. We are a country of hundreds of thousands of people, particularly in the rural areas, who have no means of livelihood. They do not have enough of land to till. They do not have enough of other employment opportunities. Therefore, as a welfare state, the state which is interested or state which is committed to the well-being of its people, the way in which the employment guarantee scheme was evolved and implemented is exemplary. There have been pitfalls in implementing a scheme of that magnitude all over the country. There will be aberrations, there will be problems. But we have been learning by the days, and today, one can safely say that it's one of the most successful programs which is tackling a large problem of rural poverty. So it's a poverty alleviation program. It's a program which is absolutely necessary for a country like India, which has got this huge problem of rural poverty and rural unemployment. My only wish is that in times of economic crisis, like the one which we are facing, there is ample scope for enlarging, the catchment area, enlarging the size of the beneficiaries, investing more, providing more funds for the scheme so that its benefits are more and its benefits get spread to larger number of days and larger people.
Thank you so much, sir. So, thank you so much, sir. Thanks for your kind response. Participants, if you have any specific questions to Shri TK Nayarji, kindly put it in the chat box. I can convey it to him. Balagopal sir, kindly unmute your mic. So I think sir Balagopal sir is finding some connectivity issue, so he is not able to speak. I'm just trying to get him online. Okay, so there is a question from Miss Hemalata. Sir, how to make the students realize that green economy is more important than financial economy?
Well, that's a very, very fundamental question, how to make the children realize the importance of green economy. You know, my simple, straightforward answer, because I know that the answer which I am going to suggest is not a comprehensive one, but catching them young. You know, habits are inculcated in children, and what you learn as a child, you know, you tend to carry it for a long, long time. So habits, when they are formed, if they are formed on the basis of understanding, based on what you see around you, based on what you hear, based on what you are taught, these are the means through which you form your opinions and you form your lifestyle. The environment in which you live, in which you are brought up, plays an extremely important role in forming your character, in forming your opinions. So to take the case of a school, or take the case of a family, if a family is conscious of the importance of environmental protection, if it leaves at least to a certain percentage the principles of reduce, reuse, and recycle, the child observes that, the child, in the formation of the habits of the child, that becomes a part. Similarly, a school where the children collectively with the teachers and the other staff, when they encourage environmentally friendly practices, that also gives, plays a very significant role in molding the attitude, molding the character, molding the views of youngsters. And I do not know whether you realize that a child, in the primary class, if it is made to plant a tree, take care of it, say water it, whether it is in the school or at your home, and therefore nurture it. I think that child, when he or she grows up, would think 10 times before cutting down a tree. Somebody who has been brought up in the atmosphere of nurturing plants and trees would find it emotionally upsetting to go on destroying trees. So therefore, in the minds of young children, environmental awareness has got to be instilled. It has got to be cultivated. We know the various processes through which children learn. And if you look at the new education policy, which has been formulated by the government, it also takes into account the importance of children. Importance of inculcating, good habits, laudable thinking in the minds of youngsters. So catch them young. That's a big part of the game.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful session and the kind response and patience hearing to the questions of our participants. We are very grateful for your kind time and your knowledge that you have shared with all our participants. Unfortunately, Balagopalji's internet connection is down, so he's not able to connect again. So, on behalf of the PN Panikar Foundation, we greatly thank you for your time and your way of putting things in the perspective. Uh, just a moment, sir. Balagopal sir is calling on the line. I will just check with him.
There is this man sitting.
Thank you so much, sir. We will we with this we are going to end this webinar, and we have shared the feedback form URL in the chat box with the participants. So kindly submit your feedback form and collect the certificate of participation for this webinar. And the day after tomorrow, we have a next webinar on the topic of Eco Eureka Principles for Eco Digital Skills on 16th. I'm going to put the registration URL for that webinar in the chat box. With this, we will end this webinar here. And we once again thank all the participants and our valuable resource person, Sri TK Nayarji, for his presence and his wonderful webinar. So we thank you so much for your kind participation, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and wish you all the best.
Thank you.